And away from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, migration remains a tough issue in the United States. Even President Joe Biden has now proposed building a section of border wall in southern Texas to help stem it. Around 20 miles, which is about 32 kilometers, will be built in Starr County along its border with Mexico, where officials report high numbers of crossings. Building a border wall was a signature policy of former President Donald Trump as president and fiercely opposed by Democrats. But in 2020, Mr. Biden promised he would not build another foot of wall if elected. His administration passed a proclamation soon after taking office that said that building a wall across the southern border is not a serious policy solution. In a statement to Associated News on Wednesday night, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection defended the latest move, saying it was using funds already allocated for a border barrier. Welcome back. Let's turn our attention now to Turkey-Iraq relations. As the Turkish Defense Ministry Yasar Güler and his Iraqi counterpart Thabet al-Abbasi discussed possible joint steps to counter terrorism and border security during talks. Abbasi was visiting Ankara after Turkey carried out airstrikes in northern Iraq on targets it says belong to the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, and that's after the group had said it orchestrated the first bomb attack in Ankara in years. Iraq has denounced the Turkish airstrikes, and Iraqi President Abdul Latif Rashid said that he hoped to come to agreement with Ankara to solve this problem. On Sunday morning, two attackers detonated a bomb near government buildings in Ankara, killing both and wounding two police officers. But the PKK claimed responsibility for this attack. Turkey regards the PKK as a terrorist group, regularly carrying out airstrikes in northern Iraq, which has long been outside the direct control of the Baghdad government. Turkey has also sent commandos and set up military bases on Iraqi territory to support its offensive. And we're back to migration issues, only this time it's in the United Kingdom. The British government says it will try next week to persuade judges at the country's top court to overturn a ruling which declared unlawful its divisive plan to deport to Rwanda asylum seekers who arrive in small boats across the Channel. In a blow to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government and his pledge to stop the boats, London's Court of Appeal concluded in June that a scheme to send tens of thousands of migrants more than 4,000 miles to East Africa was not lawful, saying that Rwanda could not be treated as a safe third country. On Monday next week, government lawyers will argue at the Supreme Court this ruling was wrong, while those representing migrants from Syria, Iran, Iraq, Vietnam, and Sudan want the judges to conclude the scheme itself as flawed. The stakes for Mr. Sunak are high, as he has made dealing with immigration one of his 5 priorities. Successfully addressing the issue could revive his Conservative Party's ailing fortunes as it languishes some 20 points behind in opinion polls ahead of an election which is expected next year. And in another development, Poland remains opposed to any European migration deal that involves relocation of migrants. The Polish president already discussed this earlier today in a joint news conference with Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki ahead of the EU summit in Grenada, discussing how to tackle increasing arrivals of refugees and migrants from the Middle East and Africa, both seen as existential challenges for the bloc. But Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party also faces elections on October the 15th, and one of its main campaign promises is to protect Poland from illegal immigration. It also announced a referendum on the issue on the same day as the vote. Well, weather events have been in no short supply this year. As we know, India is already reeling from the impact of heavy rains which destroyed bridges, totaled military trucks, and killed 14 people. But the disaster was made worse as the Himalayan glacial lake overflowed its banks and flooded a river downstream. The Defense Ministry released some of the pictures we're looking at right now. We see army trucks covered in mud. Local news agencies have also been on ground. Dissenting this, we see debris and mud covering buildings, as well as damaged roads near the Tista Low Dam. The Lonak Lake in Sikkim State burst its banks on Wednesday, October the 4th, and flooded the Tista River downstream. Authorities are saying that 102 people are still missing following this incident. The Weather Department warned of landslides and disruptions of flights as more rain is expected over the next 2 days in parts of Sikkim and neighboring states. And this is what the damage looks like from out of space. Satellite imagery shows that nearly 2/3 of the lake seems to have been drained. The Lonak Lake in Sikkim State burst its banks on Wednesday, as we told you earlier. That caused major flooding, which authorities are now saying had impacted the lives of 22,000 people. It is still the latest deadly weather event in South Asia's mountains, being blamed on climate change. The Weather Department said that Sikkim received 101 millimeters, that's 4 inches of rain in the first 5 days of October, more than double normal levels. This triggered floods worsened by one which happened in October 1968, where an estimated 1,000 people were killed. It is India's worst disaster in the region in more than 5 decades. Exclusion of anyone harms efforts to achieve the global development goals. And so the United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said when asked about Taiwan's appeal to be included in the campaign. But we'll tell you more about that. In the meantime, residents and business owners in southern Taiwan's Puting County have started cleaning up the trail of debris left by Typhoon Koinu. After the typhoon brushed past the island, killing 1 person and injuring 304, signboards and debris could be seen strewn across main tourists leading to Taiwan's famous southern netting beach this afternoon. But local residents and tourists said they were scared by the torrential rain and strong winds impounded the area overnight. And the United Nations Green Climate Fund has pulled in $9.3 billion in pledges from 25 countries to help vulnerable countries cope with climate change. With global temperatures rising, world leaders have already been looking to boost support for climate action amid mounting criticism over a lack of urgency to respond to risks. The GCF was set up under UN climate change negotiations to help channel money needed by poor states to meet their targets and reduce carbon emissions, but develop cleaner energy sources and adjust to a warming world. It is still seeking contributions to fund projects in climate-vulnerable countries over 2024 to 2027, aiming to exceed $10 billion it raised in its last 3-year round.
As one of the countries at risk of the impacts of climate change, the Green Climate Fund plays a critical role in supporting and helping our countries build resilience against the impacts of climate change. The Pacific has been an area that has been underserved and underfunded for many years in terms of financing for climate resilience. Therefore, I applaud the commitment that has been made, which is an increase on the previous pledging conference, and demonstrates the commitment, the understanding that emitting countries have towards supporting countries at risk of the impacts of climate change.
We know that the climate crisis is the greatest challenge of our time. And I think the Green Climate Fund is a symbol that we as a global community are tackling this challenge together in solidarity. And it's not only, though, a symbol, as you've heard, it's also a powerful tool, which is just getting stronger and stronger with every new pledge to build the resilience that we heard about that's needed around the world, and also to seize the opportunities of the green transformation and create sustainable growth.
Exclusion of anyone harms efforts to achieve global development goals, so says United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed when asked about Taiwan's appeal to be included in the campaign. World leaders will meet next week at the annual high-level UN General Assembly, but Taiwan is excluded under a 1971 UN resolution that recognizes the People's Republic of China as a legitimate representative of China to the United Nations. Leaders will also attend a summit on the Sustainable Development Goals, a global to-do list created in 2015 that includes issues such as tackling the climate crisis, achieving gender equality, and ending hunger and poverty.
I think exclusion of anyone holds back the goals. We said leave no one behind, and I think member states have to find a way to make sure that we are not in that position where we're excluding people. Every person matters, whether it's Taiwan or otherwise, and I think it's really important for member states to find a solution to that.
As you know, in accordance with the General Assembly resolution of 1971, we uphold the One China policy, and so all of our efforts in this are taken within respect for that resolution. We don't intend to leave any of the people of China behind, and we support all of the people of China,
including the people of Taiwan.
But we stick by the One China policy as it's in accordance with our interpretation of a General Assembly resolution.
Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine has said that he was grabbed by goons and put on the house arrest on his return from abroad. But the singer-turned-politician is the strongest challenger to President Yoweri Museveni, who has held office for almost 40 years. He has been arrested numerous times and has faced several charges, including treason. Police denied Wine's arrest, stating instead that he was accompanied home. But Mr. Wine, a former pop star whose real name is Robert Kyagulanyi, made the failed bid for the presidency back in 2021 in a tense election against 79-year-old President Museveni. The election campaign was marked by a crackdown on the opposition, where at least 54 people were killed during the anti-government demonstrations. Well, earlier, my colleague Joke Roger spoke with VOA's Halima Athumani about the situation in Uganda. Take a listen.
You had reported journalists were harassed at the point of Bobi Wine's arrest. Could you elaborate on this?
Yes, please. Today was quite a charged day. I think for journalists, we had not had this kind of action in a very long time. So you can imagine how newsrooms, were looking forward to this day, and indeed by early morning, because what we made to understand was that Bobi Wine was supposed to land at Entebbe International Airport at 10:30. So many journalists actually drove to the airport. But before they got to the airport, there were two checks, security checks, and that was where they were arrested from most of the journalists. Actually, some of them were arrested then, and then once Bobi Wine was taken away from the airfield, as you can see, of course, there was a security convoy that was escorting him, including a helicopter. He really got the VIP treatment, including a helicopter that was taking him back home. So as they were heading out of the airport, journalists decided to follow the convoy. Unfortunately, when they got to one of the checkpoints where, they pay to use the expressway, that was when, according to the journalists who were there, they saw people dressed up who they identified as Special Forces Command officers. Now, when you see Special Forces Command officers, these are people who are mandated with the security of the president. They only handle VVIP cases, but they were there. And the soldiers said they were hooded, they were wearing masks. So they will not be able to identify them, but they knew, because, if you're a journalist in Uganda, you will tell the difference between a Special Force Command officer and a normal everyday military officer. But also, you also tell the difference between them and the everyday police officer. So yes, a number of journalists were arrested. One of them actually narrated to me and told me he was dragged out of the car through the window. And, they were beating him everywhere, wherever whatever it is that they were using to beat them landed on him. So he said he had bruises all over his body, on his back, and he was going to get medical attention.
Well, it's not the first time that Bobi Wine is, being arrested. He's been arrested at different times for different reasons. Is the government usually hostile to the press in Uganda?
Look, when it comes to anything related to Bobi Wine, if you're covering Bobi Wine, first of all, you are going to be labeled, an opposition reporter. But also, many times, journalists have also had this experience. I think it was just a little after the elections. If you remember, there was a time journalists were actually beaten in front of the UN Human Rights Office, because they had gone to wait for Bobi Wine, who had gone to report cases of human rights violations and killings of his supporters. So this is not the first time. The government, many times also, by the way, the one thing that was also very evident today, which is very relatable, is that it's always the military that is beating up journalists. Police, yes, police will beat us, But when it comes to the military, they come and, when they come full swing, it's going to be bad for Jan. So it's not the first time.
And why has he been arrested this time around? Did the government give any reasons for this?
So what you need to be aware of was that before Bobi Wine actually left for the United States, for the period that he was there, Bobi Wine was carrying out a countrywide tour, opening up offices of the National Unity Party platform, different offices in different parts of the country. And with this came a lot of attention from the public. Thousands of people would come out, to welcome him in the various districts that he attended. But just 2 days before his departure, I think maybe let's say about 3 days before his departure, the police, that is when we had reports of, bombs being detonated around different parts of the city. And the police quickly came up and said, this political party needs to be aware that there are bomb attacks going on and their principal head could be a target of terrorists. So we urge them to stop. And that is how Bobi Wine stopped, the tour around the country. So before he came back, he kept tweeting and saying, when I get back to Kampala, when I get back to Uganda, I need 1 million people to march with me all the way to my home. And that is why the police swung into action, did not even give him 5 minutes in the airfield, as you saw, and he was arrested and swiftly taken home.
Right, so it has been difficult reaching out to members of his political party. Do we know their status at the moment?
Well, it's been quite a charged day. I will tell you that as I was driving along, the road that actually heads to Bobi Wine's home, the youth were, as soon as I got there was tear gas, so I had to park on the side and get out and just see what's going on. People were running around, the shop owners were closing shop, and then, the youth got rowdy. They were throwing stones and logs into the middle of the road. And then there was this one police truck that came and cleared the road, and also got a few youth, after beating them up, of course, got them to clear up the road. But there were patrols right from the morning, because I drove on that same road twice this morning. There were patrols in the morning. There were security checks around that area in the morning. Even when I came back, I think we're only lucky that everything came to an end after a heavy downpour as soon as Bobi Wine was taken to his home, obviously with him cordoned off with members of his party there. So it was a bit difficult to actually get to them, because all access to them was literally blocked by the military and security officers.
And what's the mood like in Kampala? What has the mood been like with all the events that have happened since Bobi Wine's arrival and his arrest?
Of course, people are charged, but, one thing happens and then there's always the peace. There are always parts of the country where you think everything is very peaceful. When I was speaking to the spokesperson of the Special Forces Command, because, when I got to the military told me, no, we're not in charge. Please speak to SFC. Police also say, no, they were the ones. Janice was saying, these are the people who beat us. So I reached out to the Special Forces Command spokesperson, and he says, no, we didn't even know what was going on the other side. We were only in charge of, what was happening at the National Airstrip, because today is World Teachers Day, and that's where the president was. So Special Forces had to be there because they are mandated with they are in charge of the president's security. So there are bits and places of areas that were peaceful, but also, which is something that maybe the police is going to get away with for today. There were so many young youth who were being arrested in the morning hours. But I think, and many people were literally, if you're going to the shop or you're just sitting around, all of a sudden you're being, picked up. So many people actually are in jail as we speak. So maybe a few could be lucky and they'll probably be released. So it's a mix. There are those who think, life is going on normally, and then there are homes that are going to probably sleep without their sons or husbands tonight.
Thanks again, Halima, and please do stay safe.
And just in a moment, when we return on The World Today, we'll take a look at sights and sounds from Britain's Princess Kate Wheelchair Rugby in Hull. Please stay with us. Welcome back. As France relations with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger soars, students and these West African states are now bearing the brunt of this row. Many of them who had visas to go study in the European country are now unsure of their situation.
Burkina Faso medical student Alfred Nikiama lit up as he read an email from his university allowing him to resume visa paperwork for training at a French hospital next year after being in limbo since France suspended consular services in the country. Nikiama had almost given up his dream of spending a mandatory year in France for his psychiatry specialization and resolved to doing his internship in Burkina Faso hospital instead.
Yes, you could say that we are relieved to receive an email telling us that we've been reinstated and that we could go and complete our studies and training in France. As I said, it's true that when we initially got the news that we couldn't go, it wasn't easy, even if we could continue my training here. But the fact that we are able to go to another country to gain another type of experience is enriching. Receiving this email makes us happy and content.
International law student Tondri Yara stood in front of a French visa center in the capital, Ouagadougou, hoping for some good news. The 28-year-old had been preparing his exchange at a university campus in France since October 2022.
Of course, the suspension is harmful because it really undermines everything we've been doing. You need to know that the Campus France procedure takes a year to get ready, and we started with it in October 2022, and then at the last minute, you can't get a visa. It takes a lot of energy, and you have to change all your plans. But we're not that desperate, because for me, France isn't the only destination.
Hundreds of students, researchers and artists with upcoming professional trips to France that can take months of planning have been uncertain about getting their visas due to deteriorating relations with France following a string of coups in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger over the past 3 years. As relations with these countries turned bitter, prompting France to close its consular services due to security concerns, long-standing cultural ties have also been strained. There are concerns that visa issues could further fuel anti-French sentiment and strain relations, raising further doubts about France's future in the region. According to a French diplomatic source, last year, France issued around 900 visas for Burkina Faso nationals, over 600 to Malians, and 436 to Nigerians seeking to study or intern in the country. But this year, students, doctors, artists, and business people who've had access to education and work experience in France for decades are having to rethink their plans and risk losing a year in the process.
And checking in on Syria now, US-led forces were reported to have shot down a drone over northern Syria earlier today, as US-allied Syrian Kurdish forces said that Turkish attacks had killed 8 people in an escalation prompted by a bomb attack in Ankara, which claimed by the Kurdish militants. Video footage showed smoke rising from various sites, thought to have been targeted by Turkey in Kurdish-controlled northeast city of Qamishli. But the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and a local security source said the US-led coalition has shot down a Turkish drone near a base in northeastern Syria. A Turkish Defense Ministry official said the drone shot down by the coalition did not belong to the Turkish armed forces. Without saying those whose prosperity it was, the coalition did not immediately respond to the request for any comment. But the US support for Kurdish forces in northern Syria has long caused tension with NATO ally Turkey, which views them as a wing of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is the PKK, the group which claimed some responsibility for Sunday's attack in Ankara near government buildings. The 2023 Nobel Prize in Literature has been awarded to Norwegian author and dramatist Jon Fosse. Born in 1959 in Haugesund on Norway's west coast, he is one of the world's most performed playwrights, but his work spans a variety of genres, including plays, novels, poetry collections, essays, children's books, and translations. His work touches on the deepest feelings that you have, which is anxieties, insecurities, questions on life and death, the Swedish Academy member Anders Olsen has said. Afosse is seen as a regular contender to win the prize, and among this year's favorites in the betting odds, said that he was overwhelmed and somewhat frightened by this award. He is the fourth Norwegian to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, but the first since 1928.
Very welcome to the Swedish Academy. My name is Mats Malm, I'm the permanent secretary. The Academy has convened and can now announce its decision on the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Nobel Prize in Literature for 2023 is awarded to the Norwegian author Jon Fosse for his innovative plays and prose which give voice to the unsayable.
The 68-year-old Oswald Rieders suffered a stroke in September 2014. He lost his ability to speak, walk, and move his left arm. His wife, Elizabeth, called emergency services to their Richmond, Texas home when he could not respond clearly. 9 years later, Rieders is the first stroke patient at home for 6 weeks to use a robotic arm controlled by his brain waves to recover the use of a limb. According to the University of Houston, Rieders' stroke paralyzed his left side and left him unable to speak. Though through the years of therapy, the retired FedEx driver eventually regained his speech. Although he has some difficulty due to asphyxia, which is caused by the stroke, he has limited mobility in his left arm and uses a brace on his left leg to walk.
2014, September 30th, around 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife said I was talking out of my head, and she woke me up, and she said, move your arm, and I couldn't move my arm, and I was thinking that, like everyone else, my arm was asleep. I will never take my health for granted anymore. Now I'm weak on my left side. I walk with a limp and a cane. I can't go into my backyard without my brace on. And I can't do anything like normal men do, like changing the air filter in my AC unit, standing on the ladder. You know, I can't do anything, any of that anymore.
And we end the program today with the Princess of Wales proving to be the Duchess of Rugby, wheelchair rugby that it is. But Princess Catherine earlier today joined a training session in northeastern English town of Hull. She was all smiles as she hit the ball over some rugby posts to score a conversion during that session. England's national wheelchair rugby team were crowned world champions last November, and Kate held a reception for them just last January to celebrate the win. With that beautiful note, we end the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Stay